Sagittarius, if right now you feel the rhythm of life around you quietly shifting, but in a way that feels undeniably real, you are not imagining it. This is no longer a time of sitting still, waiting for some vague sign from the outside world. You have already lived through a long stretch of suspension, a place where everything felt frozen, not moving forward, not falling back, leaving you with a quiet, burning question inside. How much longer do I have to wait? There are seasons in life when the pain is not sharp, but the exhaustion is deep. Tired from trying to understand, tired from trying to believe, tired from constantly reassuring yourself that everything will be fine, while inside it feels like standing in a room with no windows, the light fading a little more each day. Sagittarius has been there. You know that feeling, that sense of things not being ready, not clear, not fully named yet. But now, the air feels different. No one needs to say anything out loud. Your intuition already knows that something is moving, like the ground trembling softly before dawn breaks, like the wind changing direction before a new journey begins. You sense the coming change long before this moment. Back then, you simply didn't have enough proof to trust it completely. What matters is this. This time, the change does not stop at a feeling. It is no longer just a late-night thought, no longer a fragile hope you created to comfort yourself. This time, life is answering you through action, through visible motion, through situations that ask you to stand straighter and choose. You are standing at a major crossroads, not loud, not dramatic in a cinematic way, but clear enough that you can no longer turn away. This moment did not appear to test you again. It appeared because you have grown enough to walk through it. Everything that once felt stuck, delayed, suspended like unfinished stories is now beginning to move on its own, slowly but steadily, clearer with each passing day. You may notice that your patience for half-truths is gone. That ambiguity no longer sits well with you. You no longer want to live in temporary spaces, emotionally, directionally, or in how you value yourself. This is not you becoming harsh. This is you becoming awake. You understand now that time cannot be recovered, and you are no longer willing to spend it on what was never meant for you. Sagittarius carries the soul of a pathfinder, but for a long while, you were asked to pause, not because you were wrong, but because you needed to learn how to listen to yourself more deeply. Now, as the fog begins to lift, the road ahead no longer feels as uncertain. It may not be fully illuminated yet, but you know this much. You are no longer standing still. You will begin to notice small signs, a conversation that changes how you think, a decision you once feared that now feels necessary, a door you never dared to knock on, quietly opening just enough to invite you forward, not with grand promises, but with clarity and courage. And in this moment, what matters most is not how fast you move. It is that you have stopped doubting yourself. You are beginning to trust that what you feel is not imagination, that your intuition has been sharpened by disappointment, by falling, and by rising again, that this change is real, and that it is calling your name, gently but firmly. Allow yourself to slow down for a breath. Take in this new air. There is no rush, nothing to prove. Just listen to your own heartbeat. Because from here on, the movements around you will start to make sense. They will feel clearer, and they will carry the answers you have been waiting a very long time to hear. Those answers do not arrive loudly. They do not knock hard on the door. They do not force you to believe right away. They arrive quietly, like a sudden still moment, when a very ordinary sentence unexpectedly reaches the deepest place inside your heart. It may happen during a conversation that seems insignificant. It may be a piece of information you overhear by chance. It may be a situation that unfolds so quickly you barely have time to prepare yourself. But in that exact moment, you know that something has just been illuminated. For a long time, you have lived with unnamed doubts, not clear enough to conclude, not small enough to ignore. You wondered whether you were truly seeing the essence of a person, a relationship, a path. You questioned why everything seemed stuck in place. Why the harder you tried to move forward, the heavier it felt. Those questions stayed quietly inside you. They didn't create chaos, but they slowly drained your energy. And then, a missing piece appears. Not to shatter your world, but to put everything where it belongs. You realize that what you once doubted was not because you were weak or because you imagined too much. It was your intuition trying to speak to you long ago. You simply were not ready yet to hear it fully. This truth does not arrive as a shock that knocks you down. It does not come to hurt you again. Instead, it feels like the final knot being untied after a long period of tension. You exhale without even realizing how long you had been holding your breath. Some things, once they are named, become much lighter. You begin to understand why things could not move forward before, not because you lacked effort, not because you lacked patience or faith, but because a truth had not yet been placed on the table. Something had been hidden, avoided, or simply not ready to be faced. Once that truth appears, the picture is no longer blurred. The empty spaces begin to align naturally. What's striking is that, along with this clarity, a very different calm settles in. There is no longer the urge to hold on, no longer the need to wait for another sign, no longer the feeling of being suspended between staying and leaving. Inside you, a decision is forming, not rushed, not impulsive, steady. As if it had been prepared long ago, you begin to see everything through a new lens. What once confused you now makes sense. What once held you back no longer has a grip on you. You stop arguing with yourself. This clarity does not come from overanalyzing with logic. It comes from a deep inner knowing that you have seen enough. There may be a moment of regret. You may realize that if you had known earlier, you wouldn't have had to repeat certain exhausting cycles. And yet, at the same time, you understand that everything happened at the right moment. If the truth had arrived sooner, you might not have been strong enough to receive it. If it had arrived later, you might have lost yourself entirely. Now, with enough light to clearly see the road ahead, you no longer want to stand at the threshold. You know that staying suspended would only pull you back into emotions you worked so hard to leave behind. The truth does not force you to choose immediately, but it gives you something far more powerful, the right to choose fully. And in that deep silence, you realize something else. You are no longer searching for answers. The answers are already here. What remains is how you walk forward with them, with respect for yourself, and with respect for the journey you have lived through. From that very state, another movement begins to unfold, quiet, yet just as profound. There is someone in your life, maybe someone still present, or someone who once held a very important place and then walked away, who is now facing thoughts they spent a long time avoiding. No one witnesses that moment but them. No audience, no explanations. Just nights that feel longer than usual and questions that can no longer be pushed aside. They begin to look back at what they once felt but never dared to name. The feelings were real. They were clear. But they were covered by fear, by hesitation, by safer choices that felt empty. When the noise around them finally quiets, those feelings do not disappear the way they thought they would. They remain, persistent, steady, reminding them of you in a way that cannot be denied. Time, the thing they once believed they had plenty of, suddenly becomes a source of regret. Moments that have passed cannot be reclaimed. Opportunities to say what needed to be said have been missed, and in that silence, they realize something very clearly. Your presence in their life is not something that can be replaced by another person, not because you are perfect, but because you are you, the way you see the world, the way you love, the way you remain standing even when everything is not on your side. They may have avoided this before. They may have denied their own feelings, convincing themselves it was temporary, that it would fade with time. There may have been outside influences, advice that did not come from the heart, voices that made them question what they felt. But when all of that loses its power, their inner focus naturally returns to a very familiar direction, toward you, not impulsively, not in a rush of fleeting emotion, but with a slow, grounded awakening. They understand now that some people enter our lives only to teach a lesson, and others arrive to become an anchor, whether we are brave enough to hold on to them or not. You belong to the second kind. What's interesting is that while this realization is happening on their side, you are no longer standing where you once were. You are no longer waiting for validation from anyone. You have walked far enough to understand that your value does not depend on whether someone sees it or not, and that alone shifts the entire emotional balance. Sagittarius is no longer an option placed on a scale for comparison. You are no longer a backup plan, no longer someone there to fill a temporary void. In their renewed perspective, you appear as a destination, not because they fear losing you, but because they understand that if they do not move toward you, they lose something deeply real within themselves. This truth does not need to be spoken immediately. At first, it lives as a weight in the chest, as a restless pull, as a question that repeats itself whenever they think about the future. And no matter how they choose to face it, one thing has already changed and cannot be undone. They now see your place in their story clearly. As for you, in this moment, you don't need to do anything at all. No moving forward, no stepping back. Just remain steady in the value you built through a long and honest journey. Because when someone truly recognizes what matters, they will find their own way toward it, with respect, with responsibility, and with the maturity you have always deserved. And from that point on, another layer of fog begins to lift without you having to push it away. There were things in the past that exhausted you so deeply you didn't even want to name them. Words that were not true, small but persistent interference. People who entered your life not to build, but to plant doubt. They existed like background noise, never loud enough to confront directly, but loud enough to throw off your inner rhythm and make you question yourself. There were moments when you wondered whether you needed to explain yourself, to defend yourself, to try harder to make others understand who you really were. There were times when you believed that if you stayed silent just a little longer, endured just a little more, everything would eventually settle on its own. And you did stay silent. You did endure. Not because you were weak, but because you trusted that truth carries its own strength. Now, looking back, you can see more clearly than ever that you were right. Those disturbances didn't disappear because you fought them. They dissolved because they no longer had a place in your energy. When you stopped doubting yourself, false words lost their power. When you stood firmly in your values, unhealthy interference began to feel out of place. When your emotions were no longer easy to manipulate, those who fed on your confusion had no role left to play. It happened naturally. No raised voices, no dramatic confrontations. You didn't need to prove you were right. You didn't need an apology to feel at peace. The change came from within you. And because of that, it became stronger than any explanation ever could. You may notice that people who once distracted you, who once made you doubt your path, no longer appear as often. Not because they vanished dramatically, but because you no longer resonate with them. Incompatible energy separates on its own, like two streams flowing in opposite directions, without needing to collide. You may also notice something more subtle, a calmness inside yourself. When an old story is mentioned, you no longer react the way you once did. When you remember a sentence that once hurt you deeply, your chest no longer tightens. Not because you forgot, but because you moved through it. What once disrupted you now exists only as a distant memory, no longer strong enough to pull you back into an older version of yourself. And within that calm, truth stands beside you quietly. No public validation needed, no grand declaration required. People simply begin to see you differently. What was once misunderstood slowly finds its rightful place. False stories lose their audience, not because you corrected your image, but because you lived in alignment with who you truly are. Sagittarius now feels like a river that has passed through rapids. The water no longer churns violently, but it is deeper and far more steady. You no longer tense your body to keep balance against outside forces. You move with your own rhythm, aware enough to know where the shore is and which current is truly yours. What's most beautiful about this phase is that you did not lose your compassion. You didn't become bitter because you were misunderstood. You didn't close your heart because others once distorted your truth. Instead, you learned discernment, You learned the difference between noise and voices worth hearing. You learned when to open your heart and when to create distance to protect your peace. What no longer fits falls away on its own, gently, like dry leaves leaving a branch when the season changes. No pain, no regret, just a very natural law of life. And as the space around you clears, you begin to sense a new movement forming nearby. No more interference clouding your vision, no more noise pulling you off center, only clarity. And the quiet feeling that you are standing in the right place at the right time, ready to receive what truly belongs to you as it makes its way closer. And when everything finally settles like this, you begin to notice something very subtle. It's not that you suddenly started doing anything differently. It's that the way you show up in the world has changed. Sagittarius now carries a very particular kind of light. Not loud, not showy, but warm enough that others feel it the moment they share the same space with you. That light comes from inner ease, from no longer needing to prove who you are, from no longer bracing yourself just to be accepted. You can see it in the smallest details, eyes that linger a little longer than usual, conversations that open naturally without effort, invitations, messages, bits of information arriving right as you were thinking about them, as if life itself were listening more closely to your breathing. Not because you are trying to attract anything, but because you have stopped resisting yourself. For a long time, you believed that to get what you wanted, you had to try twice as hard, prove yourself 3 times over, become some version of yourself that was easier for others to accept. But now, as you stand fully and honestly in who you are, the world responds differently. Things arrive more gently, yet more deeply, faster, but without urgency. Sagittarius at this moment feels like a magnet aligned the right way. You are not pulling anyone toward you with words or calculated actions. You are simply living at your own rhythm, and what belongs to you finds its way naturally. New people enter your life carrying different stories, new perspectives, opportunities you never imagined when you were trapped in old cycles. And most importantly, you no longer question whether you deserve any of it. You know that you do. You may notice that you leave a stronger impression now, but not in a loud way. It's the impression of steadiness, of someone who has lived enough to no longer panic when change arrives. When you speak, your words carry weight. When you are silent, that silence is no longer avoidance. It becomes a meaningful pause. Others feel this, even if they cannot put it into words. The opportunities that come during this time rarely arrive with pressure. They appear more like invitations, like doors opening just wide enough for you to see what might be waiting inside. You are not pushed into deciding right away. You are invited, and you are free to choose with clarity. This is very different from before, when choices often came from lack or from fear of losing something. You also begin to notice that you are no longer afraid of people coming and going, because you understand now that true attraction is not about holding on to everything. It's about allowing what truly fits to stay. Connections no longer exist to fill empty space. They carry resonance. You meet people who can look you in the eye, who speak with sincerity, who respect the boundaries you've learned to set. None of this is random reward. It is the result of changing your life's frequency. When you become clear about what you want and equally clear about what you will no longer accept, life responds quickly. It doesn't test you again to see if you're strong enough. It responds to confirm that you are ready. Within this sense of attraction, there is a very beautiful feeling if you pause long enough to notice it. The feeling of being welcomed without having to trade yourself away, of being seen without having to perform, of being valued without shrinking who you are. Sagittarius now moves more lightly, yet each step is more certain. You are not chasing anything, and you are not closed off to life. And as you continue living in this balanced space, keeping your light warm without burning yourself out, you begin to sense another movement forming. As if from this very natural pull, new stories are quietly finding their way toward you, carrying deeper changes, more meaningful encounters, and the next set of answers that life has been patiently preparing for you in its own very personal way. Among those responses, a quiet but very real current begins to rise. It doesn't come from emotion. It doesn't come from the stories of the heart. It comes from a place tied to safety, to value, to your ability to stand firmly in the world. Sagittarius can feel this clearly, like a soft but decisive knock coming from the future. A reminder that it's time to look again at what you once left unfinished. There may have been a path you once believed in deeply. You invested time, effort, even faith, and the outcome didn't meet your hopes. Maybe it stopped halfway. Maybe it failed in a way that made you question your own abilities. Maybe you told yourself that door was closed for good, that it was better not to think about it anymore than to risk another disappointment. But life moves with quiet intelligence. What didn't take shape before wasn't always wrong. Sometimes it simply arrived too early, before you had enough experience, before your inner strength was steady enough, before your choices came from understanding instead of fear. Now, when you look back, you are no longer the person you were then, and because of that, the same path begins to look completely different. An opportunity connected to money or work may return, not loudly, not with empty promises. It comes more mature, more grounded, more real, and it asks you to meet it with clarity. This time, you're not swept away by initial excitement. You observe more carefully. You listen more closely to your body. When something truly fits, your body knows before your mind does. Your chest opens. Your breath slows. You don't need to convince yourself that everything will be okay. Sagittarius is being reminded of the value of stability, not the kind of safety that keeps you small, but the kind of foundation that allows you to stand steady when the winds shift. You've lived through enough upheaval to understand that promises that sound too perfect rarely last. And you've grown enough to no longer be tempted by shortcuts that cost you your peace. In this moment, you may notice two very different influences appear. One feels trustworthy without saying much. Everything is clear, transparent, structured, with direction and boundaries. When you're near this energy, you feel respected, heard, seen for your true value. The other may feel exciting at first, smooth words, bright visions of what could be. But alongside it comes a sense of restlessness, instability, a feeling that something doesn't quite line up, even if you can't name it yet. The difference now is that you no longer blame yourself for noticing these feelings. You trust them. You understand that intuition isn't vague. It's the distillation of lived experience. You ignored it once, and it cost you. Now, you know when to pause, when to ask the right questions, and when to move forward only after things feel solid. This returning opportunity doesn't ask you to be reckless. It invites you in calmly, with everything you've learned from past missteps. You are no longer driven by the pressure to succeed quickly. You understand that real success is something that stays, something that nourishes you rather than drains you. And as you stand before these choices, a very clear feeling emerges. You are no longer fighting life just to earn your place in it. You are being invited into a new order, one where your value is recognized in a practical, fair way. No more empty dreams, no more effort without direction, only a slow, steady certainty, like solid ground beneath your feet, ground strong enough for you to continue building what you truly want from here forward, with a quiet, enduring confidence that you are moving in the right direction. From that foundation, another important shift begins to unfold, deeper and more lasting than any outward change. You begin to realize that the greatest power you've reclaimed doesn't come from money, opportunities, or status. It comes from this. You no longer allow other people's emotions to decide how you live. There was a time when you were deeply sensitive to every shift around you. A distant look could keep you questioning yourself all night. A stretch of silence could shake you, leaving you wondering what you had done wrong. When someone was warm with you, the world felt brighter. When they pulled away, everything inside you grew darker too. You were never weak. You simply had an open heart. You loved fully. You placed others in positions of importance. But over time, that way of loving pulled you off your center. You adjusted yourself without realizing it, to keep the peace, to avoid losing a connection, to escape the fear of being left behind. And one day, you noticed how far you had drifted from yourself. That chapter has now closed, quietly and naturally. Not because you became cold, not because you shut down, but because you learned how to return to your own axis. Sagittarius now stands more firmly, not through hardness, but through clarity. You know what you want. You no longer search other people's eyes for confirmation. You know what you deserve. You no longer accept relationships or situations that require you to shrink just to stay. You may notice that you don't react as quickly as before. When someone shifts their behavior, you no longer rush to assume it's your fault. You observe, you listen, you allow things to reveal their truth before letting emotion take over. Not because you don't care, but because you respect truth more than fear. This creates a very different energy around you. Others can feel that you are no longer easily pulled into their rhythm. You don't chase to keep someone close. You don't cling to what no longer fits. That calm presence makes you both magnetic and, at the same time, harder to manipulate. Magnetic because you feel safe, grounded, emotionally mature, free of unnecessary drama, and guarded because you no longer sway at the sound of half-promises or incomplete gestures. Some people may feel unsettled by this version of you. They were used to a Sagittarius who adjusted endlessly, who tried to understand and accommodate even before being respected. When you straighten your spine and hold clear boundaries, they may feel the loss of an old advantage. But that is no longer your responsibility. You are not here to make others comfortable by sacrificing your peace. And here is something deeply meaningful you begin to notice. When you stop trading your value to keep someone in your life, the people who remain begin to change. They listen more carefully. They weigh their words and actions more thoughtfully. Not because they fear losing you, but because they respect who you are becoming. These relationships may be fewer, but they are deeper, more honest, and they do not drain you. Sagittarius doesn't need to announce this shift. You don't need to explain that you've changed. It shows in the way you walk, in how you no longer overreact to small disturbances, in how you know when to stop when something no longer aligns. You begin choosing yourself, not from selfishness, but from healthy self-respect. And within this sense of self-command, a very unique kind of freedom appears. Not the freedom to do whatever you want, but the freedom of no longer being ruled by the fear of loss. You understand this now. If someone truly belongs in your life, they will not leave because you chose to live in alignment with yourself. And if they walk away the moment you stop sacrificing, they're leaving answers more questions than their staying ever could. As you stand firmly on your own axis like this, life begins to respond differently. What arrives next no longer asks you to strain or bargain. It arrives to meet a Sagittarius who is ready to receive with maturity, with self-respect, and with a heart that is still warm, still open, but no longer lost. And when you stand in that state, you begin to realize something deeply important. Life is no longer placing you in harsh tests the way it once did. Not because you've escaped challenges, but because you've been through enough that you no longer need to be tested to prove your worth. What opens now does not carry the energy of struggle. It carries the energy of harvest. You are not entering a new phase to endure more. You are entering a phase to receive the peace you once paid for with far too much of yourself, to receive trust in yourself again after years of standing back up in silence, to receive the freedom of living in rhythm with your own heart without needing anyone's permission. When you look back, you may see that the road behind you was not smooth. There were times you gave more than you received, times you carried responsibilities that were never meant to be yours, times you wondered why life seemed harder for you than for others. But those experiences shaped you. They refined you. They formed the version of you standing here now, a Sagittarius who understands the value of endurance, of quiet kindness, of never abandoning yourself, no matter the circumstances. What is arriving now is not random magic. It is not falling from the sky just because you wished for it. It comes because you worked with yourself, honestly and deeply. You learned to let go of what drained you. You learned to say no without guilt. You learned to stay with truth, even when truth was uncomfortable. All of that became a strong foundation. And from that foundation, life begins to return to you what you truly deserve. You can feel this shift clearly. You no longer feel the need to chase. Not people, not opportunities at any cost, not standards that exhaust you. You walk at your own pace. And strangely enough, when you stop running, what belongs to you starts keeping up. Sagittarius no longer needs to hold on tightly to anyone or anything. You understand now. What truly belongs to you will never ask you to shrink yourself, to wait in anxiety, or to trade your peace just to keep it. What cannot stay when you live in alignment with yourself was never meant to be yours. And that truth, instead of hurting you, brings a deep sense of relief. This phase carries a different rhythm of life, a little slower, but far more stable, less noise, but richer in meaning. You begin to appreciate simple moments you once overlooked while trying to prove something. A quiet morning, an honest conversation, a decision made not from fear, but from clear understanding. And within this stillness, you realize something else. You haven't lost your ambition. You've changed how you walk toward it. You no longer need to burn yourself out to be seen. Your light now is steadier, warmer, and strong enough to guide you first. The right people and the right opportunities will recognize that light. They won't come to take from you, but to build with you. And finally, the most beautiful part of this chapter is not what you gain, but how you feel when you look back. A quiet knowing that you lived truthfully, that you did not betray yourself, that you had the courage to walk through darkness without letting it turn you bitter. You emerge with a heart that still knows how to love and now knows how to protect itself. Sagittarius, what belongs to you is arriving quietly, steadily. It does not need to be summoned. It does not need to be chased. It recognizes you when you are rooted in yourself, and when it arrives, it stays. Because now, you are ready to hold it with calm, with maturity, and with an unshakable trust that you are living the life you worked so hard to build.